Drop a lead weight from the surface of the Pacific Ocean. It takes roughly 64 minutes to reach the bottom. Not the seafloor, the bottom, 11 kilometers down in a gash in the Earth's crust called Challenger Deep, the deepest point in any ocean on this planet. The weight lands in darkness so complete that no photon from the sun has ever reached it. Temperature, just above freezing. Pressure, 1,093 atmospheres, the equivalent of roughly 50 commercial aircraft, stacked on every square inch of your body. Nothing should be alive there. When the American bathyscaphe Trieste descended to that depth on the 23rd of January 1960, carrying 2 men into a place no human being had ever gone, the pilot Don Walsh and the oceanographer Jacques Piccard were not entirely certain the vessel would hold. It had already cracked a window at 8,000 meters. They kept going anyway. They reached the bottom in 4 hours and 48 minutes. They had planned to stay 30 minutes for observation. What Piccard reported seeing through the remaining porthole stopped both men cold. A flatfish, lying on the sediment, alive. Something was living at the deepest point in the ocean. Something with eyes, something that moved at a depth where the pressure should have compressed every cell in its body like a paper cup dropped into a hydraulic press. The question wasn't just what it was. The question was how anything could possibly work down there at all. The Mariana Trench is not a single place. It is a 690-kilometer scar in the Western Pacific, formed at one of the most geologically violent boundaries on Earth, the subduction zone where the Pacific Plate drives beneath the Mariana Plate at a rate of roughly 2 centimeters per year. As the Pacific Plate grinds under, it pulls the crust down with it, bending the seafloor into a deep V-shaped canyon that deepens over millions of years in geological time, that makes human civilization look like an afternoon. The deepest measured point, Challenger Deep, named for HMS Challenger, the British naval vessel that first sounded its depth in 1875 during the first true oceanographic survey of the planet, sits at 10,935 meters. To put that in perspective, Mount Everest, the highest point on Earth's surface, stands 8,849 meters tall. Drop Everest into Challenger Deep, and its summit would still sit more than 2 kilometers underwater. The pressure at that depth is 1,093 times the atmospheric pressure at sea level. A styrofoam cup sent down on a research cable comes back the size of a thimble. The air trapped inside compressed to almost nothing. A submarine not specifically engineered for these depths would implode before reaching 800 meters. For nearly a century after HMS Challenger's survey, the scientific consensus was that below 6,000 meters, what oceanographers call the hadal zone, from Hades, the Greek underworld, life was impossible. The physics were simply incompatible with biology. They were wrong. The first problem is pressure, and it is not the problem you think it is. We imagine pressure as a crushing force, the kind that collapses submarines and flattens hollow objects, and at the surface of the Earth that is partly true. But the human body is not hollow. Tissue, blood, muscle, these are largely incompressible. A diver at 100 meters does not get squashed flat. The pressure kills for different reasons: nitrogen narcosis, oxygen toxicity, the bends on ascent. But at hadal depths, something else happens at the molecular level. Proteins, the machinery of every living cell, fold into specific three-dimensional shapes to perform their functions. Enzymes, ion channels, structural proteins, their shapes are everything. Change the shape, and the function stops. High pressure distorts those shapes. It forces protein molecules together, compresses their folding, and alters the geometry on which all cellular chemistry depends. At 1,000 atmospheres, the proteins in an unprotected cell don't fold correctly anymore. The cell machinery seizes, metabolism stops. This is why biology should end somewhere around 300 meters. The chemistry of life, as it exists everywhere else on Earth, is not pressure tolerant. And yet, at 11,000 meters, there are fish. Not just any fish. Fish with spines and nervous systems and eyes. Pseudoliparus suaire, the Mariana hadal snailfish, first recorded alive at 8,336 meters, the deepest fish ever documented. Small, pale, almost translucent. Not the armored leviathan you might imagine for the deepest creature with a backbone, something that looks almost fragile, drifting along the sediment in water cold enough to preserve a body for decades. The solution evolution found is a single molecule, trimethylamine oxide, TMAO, a small organic compound present in the tissues of deep-sea fish at concentrations precisely proportional to the depth at which they live. At 300 meters, a little. At 3,000 meters, more. At 8,000 meters, the tissues of the snailfish are saturated with it. TMAO is a piezolite, a pressure-counteracting molecule. It works by stabilizing protein structure under compression, the same way scaffolding prevents a building from collapsing under its own weight. TMAO scaffolds proteins against the distorting force of the deep. Without it, the proteins fold wrong. With it, they hold. Evolution discovered this solution independently in multiple deep-sea lineages. Fish, crustaceans, and invertebrates all arrived at variations of the same molecular answer to the same physical problem. It is one of the most striking examples of convergent biochemistry ever identified. Completely separate branches of the tree of life, building the same chemical tool to unlock the same door. But TMAO creates a second problem that reveals a hard ceiling on vertebrate life. TMAO is osmotically active. As concentration rises in tissue, it disrupts the osmotic balance of cells, drawing water across membranes, interfering with cellular hydration. Below approximately 8,200 meters, the concentration of TMAO required to stabilize proteins against pressure becomes so high that it begins destroying the osmotic integrity of the cells it is trying to protect. The cure becomes the poison. This is not a biological failure. It is a biochemical wall, a depth beyond which fish cannot exist, not because of pressure directly, but because the only known molecular solution to pressure creates a new incompatibility at extreme concentrations. No fish has ever been confirmed alive below 8,300 meters. The snailfish at 8,336 meters may be living within meters of the absolute biological ceiling for vertebrate life on this planet. Below that ceiling, the ocean floor is not empty. It belongs to the invertebrates. Amphipods, small shrimp-like crustaceans of the genus Hirondelia, swarm the deepest sediments and densities that would surprise anyone expecting a barren wasteland. Their tissues contain TMAO too, but their cell membranes are structured differently from fish, their metabolic chemistry more tolerant at extreme pressures. They have been collected alive from the full depth of Challenger Deep. Sea cucumbers, holothurians, account for roughly 90% of the total animal biomass in hadal trenches. Soft-bodied, slow-moving, they process sediment like earthworms process soil, extracting organic matter from material that has sunk from the sunlit ocean 11 kilometers above. Some species have been filmed moving in slow processions across the sediment at hadal depths, as if the crushing pressure and near-freezing temperature are simply the weather. And below the animals, in the sediment itself, are the microbes. Piezophiles, pressure-loving bacteria and archaea that have evolved not merely to tolerate crushing pressure, but to require it. Remove them to the surface and they die. Pressure is not an obstacle for them, but an ecological necessity. Some piezophile communities have been cultured from sediment cores taken at full hadal depth, still metabolically active, dividing, processing chemical energy from the near nothing that drifts down from 11 kilometers above. Here is the paradox of the hadal trench. It should be a desert, but it is not. The trench's V-shape does something unexpected to the ocean's slow snowfall of organic matter. Marine snow, the constant drift of dead plankton, fecal pellets, and decaying material that falls from the productive surface ocean, would normally disperse across the flat abyssal plain. But the geometry of a trench concentrates it. Organic material drifting toward the bottom of the Western Pacific gets funneled inward toward the deepest point. Current studies suggest that hadal trenches receive between 2 and 4 times as much organic carbon per unit area as the flat abyssal seafloor surrounding them. The Mariana Trench, despite being the most inhospitable address on Earth, is a trap for food. The hadal zone is not a desert at the bottom of the world. It is a concentration point, a biological accumulator sitting at the base of an 11-kilometer column of slowly dying ocean. And then the geology intervenes. The trench sits directly above one of the most seismically active boundaries on the planet. Earthquakes occur regularly along the subduction zone. When they do, the unstable sediment on the trench walls, months or years of accumulated organic material, collapses in slow-motion landslides, delivering sudden pulses of food to the deepest zones in geological time, measured in hours. The community at the bottom does not eat steadily. It feasts episodically and then waits. In 2019, the explorer Victor Vescovo completed the deepest crewed descent ever recorded, 10,928 meters, in a submersible called DSV Limiting Factor, built specifically for full ocean depth dives. He spent 4 hours on the bottom of the world. What he found disturbed him for a different reason than expected. At the deepest point ever reached by a human being, he found plastic, a plastic bag, a candy wrapper, in a place no human had physically reached before 1960, where pressure destroys any hollow object, where temperature sits just above freezing, where no photon of sunlight has ever arrived. There was plastic drifting on the sediment. And when researchers analysed the tissues of amphipods collected from hadal trenches, creatures living at depths no pollution could plausibly reach by any direct route, they found polychlorinated biphenyls, industrial chemicals banned in most countries since the 1980s, at concentrations 50 times higher than in the most contaminated river systems on land. The hadal trench is a sink. Everything that dissolves into the ocean eventually concentrates at its lowest point. The same geometry that funnels organic carbon down to the deepest life also funnels everything else humans have placed into the water above. The 11,000 meters between the surface and Challenger Deep is not a barrier. It is a conveyor. The creatures in the hadal zone did not arrive to survive. They arrived, and over millions of years they solved every problem the deep placed in front of them. Pressure, cold, darkness, scarcity, one molecular adaptation at a time. They solved problems that our best physics said were unsolvable, which raises a question that oceanographers rarely voice directly. If life found a way 11 kilometers beneath the Pacific, what does that tell us about the oceans locked beneath the ice of Europa and Enceladus, moons of Jupiter and Saturn, where liquid water sits under pressure in permanent darkness, far from any sun? The hadal zone is not just the deepest part of Earth's ocean, it is the closest analogue we have to the places in this solar system where life is most likely to exist next. The creatures in Challenger Deep are not relics. They are not anomalies. They are a proof of concept. Life does not need light. It does not need warmth. It does not need pressure a human body could survive. It needs water, chemistry, and time. The universe has all three.